Alright, hello Algebra 2 class. Welcome to your final lesson of the week. This is going to be a part 1 of 2 of graphing rational functions. So today we're going to learn about all the pieces you're going to need, basically, besides maybe like finding some extra points to graph a rational function. Then the next lesson after this, so not Monday I'll have an assignment on this, but then Tuesday we'll actually have a lesson on how to actually use this information to then graph a rational function. Just a little quick couple notes on the test yesterday. I know that was new for everybody. I know multiple choice was new. I know that was a new platform we never used before. So that is where we will be taking tests and quizzes. So primarily, unless there's a special case needed that I might need another assessment tool, which then I will explain to you. Since I know there are a couple things maybe that weren't super clear, so yes, the questions were 5 minutes, but you cannot go back. So just make sure from now on, now that we know this, is when you're on that question, you spend that time. If you want to do that question once or twice in that 5 minutes, that's the time you have allotted in order to do that question. You cannot go back. So that will be that. If you have any other things you want to mention to me on that assessment tool, please let me know. Please send me an email. But other than that, I want to keep this video to about 25-30 minutes. So let's just get started. If you have any questions on the assessment or the test, people have already reached out to me, but just please let me know and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Most of you did pretty well. I would not be concerned. Okay. And I will have those grades also, before we start, will have those grades posted and updated as soon as possible. I have some grades to update. I will make sure to update those this weekend. Alright, so graphing rational functions part 1. So what are these graphs going to look like? I just wanted to show you first. We're not actually going to graph them today, but what are they going to look like when we do graph them? They're going to look something like this. Sometimes split into 2 or 3 parts with some kind of curve. Sometimes you'll have something that maybe looks like a U here, or you're going to have some kind of 2-part to 3-part looking graph. So you're going to have to find a couple pieces of information. As you can see in the note, there's kind of 3 parts like what we're doing right now. We're going to have to find the x and y intercepts. Where is my graph going to touch the x or y axis? If not, we might have to find other points. Then I want to find my horizontal asymptotes and horizontal and vertical asymptotes. Okay, you're like, what are they? I'm going to explain how to find them and more about what they are in a second. Really what they are, okay. So horizontal asymptote is basically, so in this graph here, this is the basic graph. This is the graph of f of x, equals 1 over x. Okay, that's this graph. This graph is the graph f of x equals 1 over x. As you can see here, these 2 curves never touch the x or y axis. So what happens here is, as this graph approaches, this line, remember, so x equals lines are the lines this way, that's going to be important, and y equals lines are the lines this way, the horizontal lines. So as these both curves approach x equals 0, this function is undefined because we can't do 1 divided by 0, remember? 0 is not part of my domain. So that means the line x equals 0 is a vertical asymptote, meaning that these 2 curves of this graph is never going to touch x equals 0, which is just the y-axis. Because I can't plug 0 into my function because my function is undefined. I can't do 1 divided by 0. Horizontal asymptotes are going to be the lines, or they're going to be going this way, and we will draw these asymptotes in when we actually graph them. But basically what the horizontal asymptote is, it's, okay, so this graph is never going to have an answer of 0. This graph is never going to have an answer of 0. So I'm never going to get, so nothing I plug into x is actually going to give me the answer 0. So I have a horizontal asymptote at 0. Basically, my graph is never going to touch x equals 0, y equals 0. Basically, it's going to be points where the graph is never going to touch it. Soon, when we actually graph these, we'll have dotted lines to make these asymptotes in. That's kind of the basics of what they are. Alright, guys? So what I'm going to do is, so there are rules for horizontal asymptotes that I put on your notes. You have notes attached there. I'm going to kind of go through them as I help you find each of the asymptotes, okay? So again, today we're going to find the x and y intercepts, find the horizontal and vertical asymptotes, and I will kind of explain those rules as I go through finding them, alright? So let's start, guys, with the first function there, alright? And let's find these couple things that we need to find in order to graph. So you need my eraser. Alright. So the first function there you guys have, so again, we're still working with rationals. The first function you guys have there is f of x. Alright, so the first function, we're going to do everything here. F of x equals 3x plus 6 over x minus 1. Alright, so we have three things we need to find. We have to find, well, four things, I guess. The x and y intercepts, the horizontal asymptotes, and the vertical asymptotes. Okay, well, let's start with the intercepts. Okay, so the y-intercept is going to happen. So let's start with the x and y intercepts, part A. So the y-intercept is going to happen when this function, so when this function equals 0, okay? So there's two ways we can find that. What I'm going to do is to find my y-intercept, okay? My y-intercept is going to be a point. I'm going to do f of 0, all right? I'm going to do f of 0 to find my y-intercept. So f of 0 means I'm just going to plug 0 in everywhere where x is here. So I'm going to have, what's that, 3 times 0 plus 6 over 0 minus 1. That is just going to be 6 over negative 1, which is just negative 6. So my x here, x, because that's where x is, my y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 6. And that's going to, again, that's going to touch the y-axis. Should be the point. That's going to be the point where this graph touches the y-axis at 0, negative 6. So this will not have an asymptote at y equals 0. I mean x equals 0, excuse me, because it touches the y-axis. Alright, now to find my x-intercept, here's what I'm going to do. To find my x-intercept, all I'm going to do is set whatever the numerator is equal to 0, kind of like when I was finding my zeros. Okay, why is that? The reason that is because when this answer is 0, that means 0 is y, and then x will be whatever I plug in here. So it'll be like something, a number, whatever x is in 0. That is the y-intercept, x, 0. So I'm looking for, when this answer is 0, which is what I'm trying to figure out right now, I'm trying to find the zeros of the function. When I find the 0 of the 0 or zeros of the function, that's actually going to give me the y-intercept. So when we were finding the zeros, we were actually finding the y-intercept that whole time. Okay? So my x-intercept here is going to be it's going to be something in 0. 0 is going to be my y point, and then I have to figure out my x-coordinate. So to figure out my x-coordinate, I'm just going to set 3x plus 6 equal to 0. When I solve here, I would get x equals negative 2. So when I just solve for x here, I'll get x equals negative 2. So my x-intercept is going to be negative 2, 0. Again, my intercepts are points, not numbers. So that's the first thing. I'm going to find my x and y-intercept. And then I would, of course, plot those on my graph if I was graphing this. But right now, I just want to practice finding all these things. All right, so that's my first step, find my x and y-intercept. All right, now next, we're going to find the horizontal and vertical asymptotes, okay? So vertical is going to be pretty easy depending on the factoring of the bottom. The horizontal is just going to be following the rules, guys. All right, so next we find so part B asks you to find the vertical asymptote. Vertical asymptotes. All right, so to find the vertical asymptotes, all right, what we're going to do is we just set the denominator equal to 0. So I'm just going to set x minus 1 equal to 0. So I add that. So x equals 1 is my vertical asymptote. Now, the vertical asymptote is not a number. It's actually going to be a line. So what we would actually do is if we were graphing this, we would draw a dotted line down x equals 1. Meaning these curves, those like curves or whatever, however the graph would show up, it's never going to touch the line x equals 1. Because again, 1 cannot be an answer here. 1 is where this function is undefined. This function will never be defined at x equals 1. So these curves will kind of they'll never go past x equals 1. X equals 1 is going to be like almost like a barrier to those curves. So my vertical asymptote, which would be going this way, is x equals 1. Alright, so that's how you find the vertical asymptote. Set the denominator equal to 0. Now the horizontal asymptote, the way you would do that is you're just going to, alright, so we have the 3 rules there, right? So we can go through those now. So what happens is, okay, you have 3 rules. If the power on the top, so n is the power on the top. If the power on the top is bigger than the power on the bottom, it says the x-axis, meaning like that line, that like the x-axis, that is your horizontal asymptote. So in this case, the bigger, the top is not, if the top is smaller than the bottom, then it's the x-axis. In this case, this power is not smaller than this power, so the x-axis is not our horizontal asymptote. And then if it says if it's greater, so if this power is greater than this one, then there is no horizontal asymptote. Well, these 2 powers are the same. And that's the middle rule. If they're the same, then that means the numbers in front of x, or whatever the variable to the power is actually going to be your horizontal asymptote. So here, since the powers are the same, my horizontal asymptote is going to be 3 over 1, which is just going to be 3. So again, that follows rule 2 there, or rule 2 there. So basically, again, if this one is less than this one, it's the x-axis. If they're the same, you just divide the coefficients, or the numbers in front of the variable. If this one's bigger than this one, then there is no horizontal asymptote. So what that means is this 3 means that at y, so these curves will not pass. So like there will be a curve in between the horizontal and vertical asymptotes of y equals 3 going this way and x equals 1 going here. There'll be kind of curves in there. And I could sketch this graph for you, but again, we're going to work with these graphs more in the next lesson. But right now I just want to go over finding the asymptotes, finding the x and y intercept, because you're going to have to find these things in order to graph it. And then in the next lesson we'll graph it. I'm trying to get these lessons down a little bit in time. So that's my first function, alright? So we move into the second function, okay guys? So we're going to just do the same thing. Find the x and y intercepts, horizontal, vertical asymptotes, that's it. Just want to practice finding those. Part 1 of this part 2 lesson, 2-part lesson. So then you get the function 9 over x squared minus 9. Alright, so first let's find the x and y intercepts. Okay, so my x-intercept, there is not going to be an x-intercept. It's going to be none. Let me explain why. Remember, in the last problem, we found the x-intercept by setting, whatever the equation was equal to 0. Well, in this case, it's just a constant. It's just a number, 9. So if there's just a constant or number up there, then there is no x-intercept. So this graph has no x-intercept. So this graph will not touch the x-axis. Okay? So my y-intercept, you can just set this equal to 0. We can actually solve that. You could factor it as well if you wanted to. But for my y-intercept, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the denominator. No, my y-intercept, I'm going to do f of 0 again, alright? So I'm going to find out. So it's going to be, remember, 0 for x, which is x, and then whatever for y. So I'm going to have 9 over 0 minus 9, which is going to be 9 over negative 9, which is going to be negative 1. So my y-intercept is 0, negative 1, and I don't have any x-intercepts, okay? So that's my first thing. Find the x-intercept. There might not be some this time, so we have no x-intercepts. We got our y-intercept. All right, now we got to find my vertical and horizontal asymptotes. So again, my vertical asymptotes is going to be where the function's undefined, so where the denominator equals 0. So I'm just going to set x squared minus 9 equal to 0. Again, if you want to factor that and then solve it, that's the same thing. So I would get x squared equals 9. So square root each side. So you would get x equals plus or minus 3. So what would happen here is if you were to graph this function, you would have 2 barriers at positive 3 and negative 3 down like this way where the curve cannot go through. This graph is undefined at those 2 values, 3 and negative 3. That's why the domain is so important. So at x equals positive 3 and negative 3, the curves will never actually touch there. There's going to be like a barrier there almost. All right? So those are my vertical asymptotes, okay? My horizontal asymptotes, okay, we got to go to my rules now, okay? So we got the 3 rules there. Okay, so it looks like, so n is on the top, m is on the bottom, okay? So what we have here is that, okay, so the power on the top is less than the power on the bottom. This has a power of 0. There's no power of x up there. This has a power of 2. So since the power is less on the top than on the bottom, that means that the horizontal asymptote is the x-axis. So x equals 0 is my horizontal asymptote. This is x equals 0 is the x-axis. Actually, it's y equals 0, sorry. My fault. Y equals 0 is the x-axis. Don't get confused. Y, this way. So, 3 parts. Your x and y intercepts. And that kind of makes sense. We don't have any x-intercepts because my horizontal asymptote is the x-axis. The x-axis is almost like a barrier. So my curves are gonna be in between. We might have 2, we might have 3 curves. There's going to be a barrier with 3 and negative 3 going this way, and they're never going to touch the x-axis. All right? So we got horizontal asymptote, vertical asymptotes, x and y intercepts. Again, we will learn how to graph these. I just want to help you guys. We need to know how to find this information first anyway. And hopefully we can grasp, I'm trying to help you grasp a little bit of understanding of what these things are by explaining them in a sort of visual way. All right? Again, once you can find all this stuff, then we can, the last part, D, would be, graph it. And there'll be different ways to graph different ones depending on the information that we get from all this stuff. Okay? Alright, we only have one more function to go. I just wanted to do 3 examples to not make this too long. So my last example there, sorry, I'm just pulling out my notes here. My last example there was this one, right? You have f of x equals x squared minus 4 over x squared minus 4x. Alright? So we got 3 pieces, okay? So first, find my x and y intercepts. Okay, so a reminder to find my x-intercepts, alright, we just do f of 0 so sorry guys. To find my x-intercepts, all we're going to do is we're going to set the numerator equal to 0, right? Because this, so 0 over anything is going to be 0. So to find my x-intercepts, I'm just going to do x squared minus 4 equals 0. So I'm actually going to have 2 x-intercepts here. I'm going to add 4 over. So x is going to equal plus or minus 2. Remember, when I solve and I square root, I get 2 answers. So I have an x-intercept at 0, 2, and 0, negative 2. Or actually, sorry, other way around. Negative 2, 0, and 2, 0. Sorry, guys. I'm mixing my x and y intercepts up. Alright, now, for our y-intercepts, what we've been doing here is we've been doing f of 0, right? Well, if I plug in 0 for this function, right, this is going to be 0 minus 0. I'm going to get an undefined answer. So 0, the answer, like 0 is one of my, makes this function undefined. So there are no y-intercepts. So these answers could be none, depending on the problem. In this case, because f of 0 is undefined, there are no y-intercepts. Alright? Alright, so now the next part is vertical and horizontal asymptotes, right? So B, so to find, remember the vertical asymptotes, that's the next part. We set the denominator equal to 0, right? So we have x squared minus 4x equals 0. Alright. So I'm going to take the x out. Right, we can factor that. So I have two vertical asymptotes. So I have a vertical asymptote at x equals 0, which is, I'm going to get out of the way in a second, which is the y-axis. So I have two vertical asymptotes. One, the y-axis, so my graph is not going to touch the y-axis. Again, we have no y-intercepts, it makes sense. Also, I have another one at x equals 4. So between 0 and 4, there's going to be two barriers there where my graph is not going to touch either of those lines. It's not going to touch the y-axis. It's not going to touch the line x equals 4. Again, x equals lines go this way. Y equals lines go this way. That's going to be important for this. All right, now, for our horizontal asymptotes, again, because the highest powers of x are the same on top and bottom, all right, they're both 2. The numbers in front of them is just 1, so my horizontal asymptote is going to be 1 over 1, or just 1. So I'm going to have a horizontal asymptote at y equals 1. So my barriers are going to be, the y-axis and 4 this way, and then 1 this way. It's going to be a very interesting graph if I showed you it. So again, that's really it. I just want you guys to be able to find these 3 parts. Can you find the x-intercepts? Can you find the vertical asymptotes? Or vertical asymptote, can you find the horizontal asymptote? So please let me know if you guys have any questions. So please look over this. All you have to do tonight is you have to just answer a Google form. So ask me on my Google form, I'm asking you for any questions. And then also, just make sure you watch the video. Everyone's been doing Christmas lights outside for celebrating this coronavirus and make things joyful. I am wearing Donald Duck Christmas socks. That is the answer to the question on the Google form. Have a great weekend, guys.